The role of motivation, aptitude, and context. The study of second language acquisition, SLA, is fundamentally the study of human potential and environmental interaction. While the ultimate goal is the successful command of a new linguistic system, the journey to proficiency is never monolithic. It is a highly variable process, profoundly conditioned by individual psychological mechanisms and external environmental pressures. Defining the language learner, therefore, requires moving beyond a simple measure of input received and output produced. It necessitates a deep understanding of the internal engines and external landscapes that govern learning. The learner is not a passive recipient of knowledge, but a dynamic agent whose success is intricately defined by the synergistic roles of three core variables: motivation, aptitude, and context. To adequately theorize about and effectively practice second language teaching, one must appreciate how these forces intersect to create the unique profile of every single individual undertaking the task of language learning. Motivation stands as the undisputed centerpiece of SLA research, often described as the engine that drives and sustains the entire learning process. At its most basic, motivation is the psychological impulse that initiates, directs, and maintains goal-oriented behavior. However, its complexity in the domain of language learning stems from its deep connection to personal identity and social integration. For decades, the field was dominated by Gardner's socio-educational model, which introduced the seminal distinction between integrative and instrumental motivation. Integrative motivation refers to the genuine interest in learning the L2 to better understand and potentially integrate into the culture and community of its speakers. It implies an affective closeness and a desire for social identity alignment. Instrumental motivation, conversely, is goal-oriented and practical, driven by external rewards, such as achieving a better job, passing an exam, or fulfilling a course requirement. While instrumental motivation can provide a powerful short-term burst of effort, integrative motivation is often cited as a better predictor of long-term persistence and higher ultimate proficiency, particularly in immersion settings, due to its ability to sustain effort through inevitable plateaus and setbacks. Contemporary perspectives, however, have refined this dichotomy through the lens of self-determination theory, SDT. SDT reframes motivation across a continuum ranging from amotivation, lack of intent, to intrinsic motivation, performing an activity for its inherent satisfaction. The most powerful predictor of sustained effort in modern research aligns with Dornier's concept of the L2 motivational self-system, L2MSS. This system posits that the most significant motivator is the learner's vision of their future self, the ideal L2 self. This is the identity the learner aspires to achieve by mastering the new language, perhaps becoming a professional working abroad or a successful academic researcher. When the learning task aligns closely with this ideal self, effort is no longer merely instrumental. It becomes intrinsically meaningful, resulting in a profound increase in commitment, resilience, and willingness to communicate. Pedagogical intervention is therefore heavily reliant on techniques that shift learners from purely extrinsic grades to more intrinsic or self-congruent motivation. This includes fostering learner autonomy, making learning tasks personally relevant, and creating a supportive classroom environment where the vulnerability inherent in language use is minimized. Ultimately, the motivated learner is the one who has successfully mapped the language to a desired future identity, transforming an external requirement into an internal, personal quest. The cognitive blueprint, the specificity of language aptitude. While motivation governs the willingness to learn, aptitude refers to the specific cognitive machinery that determines the rate and ease with which an individual acquires a second language. Historically, aptitude research was driven by the quest to predict success and place students efficiently in language training programs. This resulted in the foundational work by Carroll and Sapin, who developed the Modern Language Aptitude Test, MLAT, which remains the standard conceptual framework for this construct. MLAT identifies 4 critical domain-specific components of language aptitude, differentiating it sharply from general intelligence, IQ. Number 1, phonetic coding ability. This is the capacity to perceive, process, and retain new distinctions in sounds, phonemes, and to associate those sounds with written symbols. A learner with high phonetic coding ability can quickly and accurately discriminate between L2 sounds that might not exist in their L1, such as distinguishing between Spanish rolled R and English retroflex R, and retain these sounds in short-term memory for recall and reproduction. 2. Grammatical sensitivity. This refers to the ability to recognize the grammatical functions of words in a sentence without necessarily knowing the formal rules, i.e., identifying the subject, verb, and object intuitively. This skill is crucial for understanding how to manipulate sentence structure and derive implicit rules from observed language data. 3. Memory for rote association. This is the speed and efficiency with which a learner can forge and recall an association between an L2 lexical item, a word or phrase, and its meaning or equivalent in the L1. This is the bedrock of vocabulary acquisition, measuring how quickly a learner can commit new words to long-term memory. 4. Inductive language learning ability, perhaps the most complex component. This is the capacity to infer or generalize the rules governing a language from samples of language input. This is the skill utilized when a learner deduces a pattern of verb conjugation or pluralization simply by observing multiple examples, facilitating the development of an accurate internal grammar. A critical misunderstanding often surrounds aptitude. It is not a determinant of ultimate success, but rather a variable impacting the path to success. A learner with high aptitude might need less explicit instruction and fewer repetitions to internalize a rule, allowing them to progress faster initially. Conversely, a low aptitude learner may require more scaffolding, more explicit instruction, focus on form, and significantly more time. The implications for pedagogy are clear. Instead of treating aptitude as a fixed barrier, teachers must adapt their instructional methods to accommodate different aptitude profiles. High aptitude learners may thrive in communicative tasks where they induce rules. Low aptitude learners benefit greatly from structured, analytical, and repetitive exercises that compensate for weaker memory or induction skills. Aptitude, therefore, defines the cognitive blueprint, guiding the teacher in selecting the most effective methodological approach for each individual. The environmental matrix, context and conditions. While motivation and aptitude reside primarily within the learner, context represents the environmental matrix, the external conditions, social realities, and institutional structures that mediate the entire SLA process. Context is typically categorized along two axes, the social environment and the instructional environment. The social context is perhaps the broadest determinant, encompassing the degree of social and psychological distance between the learner's L1 group and the L2 target community. Schumann's acculturation model, for instance, argues that the more social distance exists, example, perceived hostility, segregation, or lack of political equality, the less likely a learner is to successfully acculturate, and consequently, the less input they will receive, and the lower their ultimate proficiency will be. In a supportive social environment where the L2 is valued and interaction is encouraged, the learner's opportunity and desire to use the language are amplified. The instructional context refers to the setting in which learning takes place, typically divided into instructed, classroom, and naturalistic immersion environments. Instructed settings provide controlled input, corrective feedback, and the crucial opportunity for focus on form, Phone F, explicitly drawing attention to linguistic structures. This environment is highly effective for improving grammatical accuracy and developing metalinguistic awareness, but often falls short in developing fluency and pragmatic competence, knowing what to say when. Naturalistic settings offer copious, authentic input and high pressure to use the language for real-world communication. While excellent for developing pragmatic skills and fluency, the input is uncontrolled and error fossilization can occur due to a lack of systematic feedback on specific structural errors. Furthermore, the instructional context includes the specific syllabus design, e.g., communicative language teaching, task-based learning, and the quality of the teacher. A high-quality learning context provides ample opportunities for meaningful interaction, the source of intake, offers necessary negative evidence, correction, and strategically converts instrumental goals, passing a course, into integrated ones, communicating with peers. Ultimately, context defines the availability, quality, and necessity of the linguistic input and interaction that the learner receives, serving as the crucible in which motivation and aptitude are either exploited or stifled. The synergy of learner variables. The language learner is best understood not as a summation of these three variables, but as a dynamic interaction among them. The most successful learners typically exhibit high motivation, above-average aptitude, and access to a rich supportive context. However, deficiencies in one area can often be compensated for by strength in another, demonstrating the interconnected synergy of the learner profile. For example, a learner with relatively low aptitude, difficulty with phonetic coding or grammar analysis, may still achieve high proficiency if they possess exceptionally high integrative motivation and operate within a naturalistic context. Their sheer persistence and drive, motivation, will compel them to seek out more input and practice, contextual utilization, effectively compensating for their slower cognitive processing rate, aptitude. They outwork their aptitude limitation. Conversely, a learner with extremely high aptitude who is forced into a sterile, unsupportive instructional context with low instrumental or intrinsic motivation is likely to underachieve. Their cognitive capacity remains latent because the motivational engine is unstarted and the context offers no fuel. The role of the expert linguist and teacher is to act as an individual difference diagnostician. 1. Diagnose motivation. Identify the source, instrumental, integrative, self-ideal, and work to internalize external goals. 2. Diagnose aptitude, while not through formal testing. Tailor instruction by observing where the learner struggles. If they have trouble noticing patterns, provide more explicit rules. If they struggle with new sounds, provide more focused auditory discrimination practice. 3. Optimize context. Manipulate the learning environment by creating authentic communicative tasks, maximizing comprehensible input, and reducing the affective filter, anxiety, to ensure optimal conditions for uptake. The language learner is the most complex variable in the equation of second language acquisition. The endeavor to define them is an ongoing process that requires continuous engagement with cognitive, social, and psychological research. The success of any pedagogical endeavor hinges upon recognizing that the learner is a product of their unique psychological blueprint, aptitude, their sustained will to achieve a goal, motivation, and the environmental conditions that either facilitate or impede their progress, context. By viewing motivation, aptitude, and context not as isolated traits but as deeply interdependent facets of the learner's identity and experience, educators can move beyond one-size-fits-all instruction to develop truly adaptive, effective, and human-centered pedagogical practices. Understanding this tripartite relationship is the essential prerequisite for maximizing human potential in the lifelong identity-shaping journey of language acquisition.